Well, here we are 6 months later. After my basically impromptu trailer reaction, I guess we'll call it that, to IGN's gameplay reveal of Aliens Fireteam, now called Aliens Fireteam Elite for some reason, I decided to play the game, if only because some people said it's actually good, and also because that original video had a strange amount of backlash, though not nearly as much as, at least one of my recent videos. So I just decided, maybe the game's actually good. Let's check it out. So what do I think about the game? Is it nearly as bad as I thought it would be? Is it exactly as bad as I thought it would be? Or is it even possibly worse than that? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out. But before you do the things the algorithm likes. It really helps out the channel. Like, comment, whatever, all the things. Thank you. And without further ado, let's see if this is just another bug hunt. So let's just get right to it. Is the game bad? Is it good? Honestly, it's somewhere in the middle. Pretty much every point I made in the original video was correct. Despite the fact I've seen some people are going back to that video and commenting I was wrong. No, I was absolutely correct. It is a World War Z clone, absolutely to a T. You'll shoot thousands of mindless AI that charge toward you in straight lines, obviously very scripted pathways, and shoot them with basically the same handful of guns for countless hours. And some of you will cynically say, or maybe smart-assly, that isn't that every co-op horde shooter? No, it isn't. I'm sure you've all heard of a little game called Left 4 Dead, and specifically Left 4 Dead 2 pretty much perfected the formula that every single co-op horde shooter has used since, and most of them have done it much worse. And this is yet another game that copies that formula but doesn't understand why it was so good in the first place. And even worse, it's copied basically the same RPG mechanics from World War Z, which, while it was surprisingly competent, was not a great game. And so I guess the only purpose of this video is to find out, is it worth playing? Because it's not terrible, it's definitely not a terrible game. I'm not going to pretend it is. But I honestly just don't think it's worth your time, unless it's super cheap. $40 is not an excuse. This game cut many corners. Masculine, it's literally fucking Neil Druckmann. Are you kidding me? Let's just start right off with the character creator, which some of you are going to think is not even worth mentioning. And the only reason I do think it's worth mentioning is because of one little thing that I guarantee half of you didn't even notice, but you better believe I did. Let's take a look at what's supposed to be the gender slider, gender selection. Notice how it says archetype, and the choices are masculine and feminine. Yes, they actually are catering to trans people with the character creator in an Aliens game. If that isn't a red flag, I don't know what is. Either way, character creator is fairly simple. You have a few female and male voices to choose from, which are not limited to your gender for obvious reasons. And then you just basically get straight into the game. There are 4 different classes. You take a 3-man fire team into each mission, so you'll always be missing out on one of the classes. And so each class is basically just 2 ability moves and 1 passive ability, right? And as you level up, you unlock new slots where you can upgrade each of your abilities to have different effects. And this does change how the character plays quite a bit, so I'll give him credit for that. But essentially, your class does exactly what is described. I played the Demolitionist because I like blowing stuff up. So that meant basically carrying around a pulse rifle, and my secondary weapon was either the smart gun, flamethrower, or grenade launcher, which the grenade launcher is actually fucking terrible. I was very disappointed in how bad it was. But I'll admit, the other 2 were actually pretty competent. The flamethrower is notably a bit better than it usually is in video games. Video game flamethrowers are usually terrible. That being said, I only played it on normal difficulty. I imagine on higher difficulties where friendly fire is on, the flamethrower is probably one of the worst weapons in the game. I didn't play as every class because I got bored of this game after 1 playthrough. There's no way you're going to get me to play this game again. I don't care if it gets better on higher difficulties where the enemies are just bigger bullet sponges and it's a bit harder. I don't care, honestly. The game was too boring. The game is structured in 4 mini campaigns that are about an hour and a half long. Each of these mini campaigns is broken down into 3 30-minute levels, and the structure of each level is basically exactly the same between each. It's a series of linear hallways with semi-open square-like rooms. Many of those square rooms are just defend the point objectives. You will do this many, many times, and it is exactly the same every single time. You throw down whatever turrets the game decides to give you, or if it doesn't give you any turrets, maybe you buff yourself with an incendiary magazine or a shock magazine, or maybe throw a couple mines down. And then you shoot waves of mindless AI enemies. So I guess the question is here, is shooting the enemies at least fun? Kind of. Again, it's not terrible. I'm not going to pretend it's terrible. But it's just too simplistic, and the enemies are too dumb. And a lot of the enemies are bullet sponges, which is very rarely fun. So basically what I ended up doing for most of the game is just picking off all the xenomorphs, running in a straight line with my pulse rifle, and when they got close, I swapped to the other gun. If they clustered up, I used my missile ability, and if they got too close to me, there's a small like area of effect flashbang or smoke grenade or whatever the hell it's supposed to be. It basically just knocks them on their ass for a second. That was pretty useful. And I did that over and over and over and over again for 6 hours. The only gameplay variety is that each new level does introduce at least one new enemy type, or I guess I should say each campaign, not level, really. And that's fine. However, you may have been wondering if you're playing the first level, why are there cover-based mechanics? Oh, you'll find out in the second level. You actually have to fight Seeks and Synthetics, and they're basically just, you know, cover-based shooter enemies. You fight them exactly like any other cover-based shooter, and it's about as bad as most other cover-based shooters are. It is definitely not Gears good, and I wasn't exactly a huge fan of Gears, but it's certainly worse than Gears. Worse than even Mass Effects, I would argue. And this is where the bullet sponges come into play. Those fucking synthetics can take like 20 headshots without dying. Even using the Electro magazine power-up, they can still take so many goddamn headshots. It's ridiculous, dude. And I feel like someone in the comments is gonna say like, oh, you were shooting them in the wrong place. Well, how was I supposed to know? They have body armor around the rest of their body. It looks like the head is the part you're supposed to shoot. And that's sort of built up as a mechanic, is that some enemies have different weak spots. Again, it feels like it rarely comes into play except for the tankiest xenomorphs. Which, yeah, I suppose I should talk about the xenomorph types. This is where it's very apparent that they ripped off Left 4 Dead. There are boomer ones that explode, spitter ones that spit, chargers that charge you and tackle and slash you in the face, stalkers that hide around corners and also jump on top of you, and then tanks, which absorb a shit ton of hits. It's the exact same system. The only times when the game feels like it's mixing it up is there's also a third faction of enemies, these pathogen mutants or whatever. I don't know if this is something that's actually canon. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in one of the comics or something. But you fight these explodey spiders and what used to apparently be a 6-legged cat that is now like some kind of monster that turns invisible. And that thing is also a super bullet sponge. And it was kind of a neat idea to have an enemy faction where most of them explode on you, so they feel like more of a threat than your average, like, tiny, weak-ass xenomorph. Which, it's hilarious that I'm saying that about a xenomorph of all things. What is the appeal of Aliens again? I mean, I love the movie, but in the movie, 3 people didn't kill 5,000 xenomorphs by themselves. But again, it doesn't really matter which enemy faction you're fighting. The AI is so obviously scripted, dude. They all crawl out of like one of 3 or 4 holes in a room, and then they just crawl on the ceiling or run on the ground in a straight line toward you. They don't even attempt to like dash left or right. Some of the bigger xenomorphs are even dumber. Like the xenomorph drone, which is like one of the weaker chargers, essentially. It's supposed to like run up to you, slash you in the face, and then go run away and hide. But half the time he just ends up dying before he gets a chance to run away. It just seems so awkward. Especially since you kind of have like this Dark Souls dodge roll, which is kind of funny. And you could just dodge out of the way of when the xenomorphs try and pounce on you pretty reliably. I don't know, they just feel like pussies. This is supposed to be the most dangerous life form in the universe or something, right? But they just die by the hundreds so easily. And no, a higher difficulty setting would not fix the problem. The point of xenomorphs and why they're supposed to be threatening is because they're supposed to be intelligent. They are anything but. They are glorified zombies in this game. So I guess to try and be positive for a bit so people don't, get all over my back for not naming what few positives the game has, I'll say I liked the environments. There's a lot of cool references to alien movies. There's one to Prometheus with the spaceship. And I'm sure there's a lot of little references in there to like comics or maybe minor moments in the movies that I didn't catch on because I'm not a huge Alien fan, I'll admit. I like them as much as the next guy. I think the plasma rifle, when the sound effects work, sounds perfect. I mean, obviously the sound effects were pretty much ripped from the movie. I also think the soundtrack was surprisingly decent, even if some of the songs don't really fit the situations that they're in. It sounds very much like the movie's soundtracks. The weapon customization is also surprisingly pretty good. Each of your weapons have 3 different attachment slots, and you'll find some weapon attachments, and weapons for that matter, as you complete the missions, and you can also purchase some from the store. And for the most part, they actually did have a significant difference in how the weapon handled, whether that's a large magazine size, less recoil, higher accuracy, higher range. So I'll give them credit on that front. Other than that, I don't know. It's a co-op game. I suppose that's an upside, but you knew that already. And honestly, I could elaborate more, but should I? Do I need to? All you have to do is watch this gameplay footage, and how basically all of it looks exactly the same, to know what type of game this is. It was exactly what I said it would be in that earlier video. It's a 6-hour-long game that is completely built upon replayability, but fake replayability, aka, let's just crank up their damage and health sliders. And maybe just, throw in a little twist in there. Like in the case of this game, 1, like I said before, friendly fire increases with each difficulty setting. And 2, there is a challenge card system, which is not a bad idea. I think it was implemented pretty okay, where some of them restrict whether or not you can use consumables. One of them takes away your UI, and there's some other interesting ones in there. And in return, you get more EXP or more money. I'm completely fine with that. It's kind of similar to, like, Destiny with the strikes or nightfalls and shit. But you were stretching 6 hours of content razor thin, dude. Why do you want to do the same goddamn thing over and over and over again? You were already doing that in the first 6 hours. Making it harder is not going to make it any more interesting. I'm not going to lie to you and say the game wouldn't be fun if you played it with friends. Because playing any game with friends makes it fun. When's the last time you played a co-op game that legitimately wasn't fun with friends? That is not an accomplishment. That is the bare minimum expected of a co-op game. Before I end this video, I do want to respond to a suspiciously positive review of this game by one of the biggest game review YouTubers, SkillUp. If you're not interested in this, you can skip to the timestamp to get to the conclusion, or more likely, stop the video here, since I'm sure you have a good idea of what I think about the game. And I am not a reply tuber, and I'm never going to be, but sometimes you just see things in reviews that are either highly disingenuous or just a straight up lie. So let's take a second to evaluate some of the very obviously negative parts of the game that he's managed to spin as a positive. So I mentioned the game cutting corners earlier. Well, what exactly does that mean? It means there's no fucking lip sync. Any of the characters speaking, no lip movement whatsoever. They couldn't even bother to put that in. There's also like no cutscenes, not even for like the final climactic mission where you blow up the fusion reactor on this old ship. So what does our buddy SkillUp have to say about this?
The developers did not waste their limited budget on adornments like lip syncing or cutscenes or a lot of things. They just put all of their money into making guns that are fun to fire, spaces that are fun to move through, classes that are fun to play as and with, and aliens that are fun to shoot.
Okay, let's just break this down point by point. So first of all, he's making excuses for the game being incredibly bare bones in anything but the very core essentials that makes it a co-op horde shooter. And honestly, if this was a better game, I wouldn't even have a problem with this statement. For example, the Dark Souls games. None of those characters have their lips move, and people generally don't complain about it. But this is no From Software game, I can promise you that. So he excuses this by saying, the guns are fun to fire. Sure, I mean, it's really just the bare minimum of a third-person shooter. There's mostly vertical recoil, which I prefer over horizontal recoil in most cases, so okay. Weapon attachments affect your level of recoil and your range and things like that, which I suppose can be satisfying. But half of what makes a gun satisfying to shoot are the enemies you are shooting, and as I already said, there are many bullet sponges in this game. Second claim, spaces that are fun to move through. This is utter bullshit. It is all hallways, and then the occasional large room that you often have to defend against waves of enemies, or in the rare case, you just get ambushed and have to shoot enemies anyway, even if you're not supposed to defend the point. There is nothing fun about how you move through these areas. You are glued to the ground. This isn't Uncharted, where you can like climb a random wall while aiming and shooting that would give it a unique flair of some kind. It is literally what you've played in every other third-person shooter. The level design never opens up because this is a strict co-op game, so it has to be linear to a point. But again, I point you to Left 4 Dead 2, where the open areas were actually open in that game. As in, there were very little obstructions to you being able to, strafe away from zombies in whatever direction you choose. His third claim is that the classes are fun to play as. I won't necessarily dispute this one. I think they're fine. And then the fourth claim, the aliens are fun to shoot. Again, I already addressed this in the first point. But no, not really. I would say the basic xenomorph type and the pathogens that explode when they jump against you are fun to shoot because they die quickly. Every other enemy type is a bullet sponge, pretty much. Unless you and 1 to 2 other teammates are focus firing every time a stronger variant shows up, it's going to take forever to kill that thing. And I imagine it only gets worse on higher difficulties, definitely not better. On normal, it was a giant fucking pain in the ass. It wasn't hard, it was just boring. Alright, let's move on to another of his major points I disagree with.
Alien's Fireteam Elite is one of the better paced horde-style shooter games I've played, not only because it knows when and how to change up its scenery, but because it knows how to use that scenery to change up the flow of gameplay, which in turn will prompt you to make changes to your squad composition, the abilities and perks and weapons you bring, and how you work together as a team.
See, this is technically true, but it's very misleading if you haven't played the game. Like I said before, it's 4 campaigns, 12 levels total. So what he means is, in the Promethean level, aka the second level, there are much wider open spaces, so the sniper's better. And the Hive, the 4th level, the close range weapons are good. The thing is, if you're playing for the first time, you don't even know this ahead of time, and you can't switch your gear in between levels. So if you picked a shitty weapon, you're stuck with it for that entire campaign. Now for my last rebuttal, I'm going to rewind a bit back toward to the beginning of the video, because he essentially claims his conclusion in the beginning. I know this is popular in video essays, but the point is, it doesn't matter if this was at the beginning or the end of the video. This is basically his conclusion.
Alien's Fireteam Elite is a simple but extremely competent horde-based shooter. It's unambitious in the best possible sense of the word. It's not trying to reinvent the horde-based cover shooter with convoluted bullshit for bullshit's sake. It's simply doing what we already know works.
See, I don't even have a problem with the core message of this statement, but just the way that it's said. All you would have to do is swap a few words around, and it would essentially be the same exact conclusion I came to. It is a perfectly competent game, but does not excel in any way. That's essentially what I believe. But it's the fact that he twists his words around to make something so simple and unambitious and repetitive sound like an amazing Game of the Year contender. The worst part is, the entire review is like this. These aren't just the 3 worst clips I could find in the video. The whole thing is basically unabashed and undeserved praise for this game, and every time he brings up a legitimate criticism, he dismisses it because the game is supposedly super fun. I won't deny the claim that it's fun with friends. I'm sure it is. As are most co-op games. I don't know how many times I have to say that. I had fun playing Dead Space 3 in co-op. It doesn't make Dead Space 3 a good game. It sure as hell isn't. And honestly, if you don't believe me, just watch the review. 18 minutes isn't that long. You can take that time out of your day and see if I'm right or wrong. Come to your own conclusion, seriously. So, in any case, his review was not a fucking professional review, even if it sounded like one. Whether that means he was paid off or was just fanboy dick sucking on a franchise that honestly people probably shouldn't care about anymore. There hasn't been a good piece of media made for Alien or Aliens since Alien Isolation, and I don't think we're ever gonna get that sequel. But people never let go of nostalgia. I'm guilty of this myself. And so in conclusion, you know, should you get the game? Not at $40. Should you even get the game at $20? Well, I guess if you just want a co-op game to play with your friends, there isn't necessarily that much wrong with it, it's just not very good. It's the bare minimum expected of a co-op game and not much better. So yeah, I don't know, I can't really recommend this game to anybody in good faith. Unlike a certain Australian YouTuber who may have been called a shill by some other people. Again, I don't even know if there's really necessarily that much wrong with the game so much as there's not much right with the game. It's just a perfectly mediocre game. Aggressively mediocre, if you will. I just think it's a very telling sign when not even ACG can recommend your game. But yeah, no, unless you're a huge Aliens fan, just stay away from this game. It's not worth it. Just play Alien Isolation, or if you have to play like a co-op shooter, I don't know, just play Left 4 Dead 2 again. If you have to play an alien action game, maybe play the old Aliens vs. Predator games. That's about it, I guess. I would really just say play anything else. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Do the things the algorithm likes. Check out my Patreon if you want to support me directly. And, you know, what's up? I tried to be a little bit more positive with this one, but I really just didn't like the game. It bored me. I was pretty much bored the entire time. Next review will probably be Psychonauts 2. I'm also going to check out Tormented Souls on the recommendation of a commenter. I don't know if that'll be worth a review, but we'll see when I'm done with it, I guess. And yeah, I think that's about it, guys. I'll see you next time.